So our forum today will showcase the Australian space sector and provide insight on an international level. We will start with a briefing from the Australian Space Agency and the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, which will be followed by a bilateral panel which explores the synergy and common interests between the two countries. Before the lunch, Deloitte's Gravity Challenge initiative will be presented, so highlighting the importance to bring market demand and innovators together to create new, viable and commercial offerings, leveraging space data and capability. And we heard a little bit more from the Premier about that earlier, so I can't wait to see this next part. Early in the afternoon, discussion will continue in the Venture Capital panel session with the international insight into the new venture capital investment model for deep tech. And our final panel session will be led by the SmartSat CRC in conjunction with National Security and Defence partners relating to the Starshot strategy and development of Leap Ahead Australian capabilities. Before we begin, it is important for me to let those using the app know that if you would like to submit questions to our speakers, you must ensure that you're in the correct interactive session within the app. You will need to select the interactive sessions that you would like to participate in from the agenda menu item. So let's get started. The Australia-Japan bilateral collaboration is an important one. Whilst Japan is established and experienced as a spacefaring nation, Australia's space sector is young and growing, building on a significant and long history of support for the international space sector. Both are ambitious and both are innovative. So I am very excited for this session, which kicks off with our headline speakers. Representing the head of the Australian Space Agency, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Anthony Murfett, Deputy Head of the Australian Space Agency.
Good morning, everyone, and it's wonderful to be here today and to talk to you all. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on where we are meeting, whether it be in Adelaide, Canberra, Sydney, or around the world. And I would like to pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. And an important part of our journey in the Australian Space Age is to ensure we acknowledge the 65,000 years of the world's oldest astronomers as we go on our future journey. So good morning to you all, and I'm here representing Dr. Megan Clark to talk to you about national and international trends and to then share the stage with the president of JAXA, where we can explore Australia-Japan relationships and some of the exciting missions that we'll be working on going forward. And if we just ask to go to the next slide. We'll go to the second slide, please. And so, as I said today, what we'll be doing is I'll walk through both just the national trends and then move into the international trends to give the audience a bit of a feel of what the Australian Space Agency is seeing both here in Australia and around the world. Next slide. But before we do that, we heard from the Premier this morning talking about some of the exciting activities we're seeing around the world. We've had SpaceX event with Crew Dragon sending astronauts to the International Space Station. We're going to talk about Hayabusa 2 and the excitement that will generate right here in South Australia. But I always like to pause and reflect back to the strong history that Australia has played over many, many decades. Between the 1950s and the 1970s, Australia was at the heart of the space activities. We were one of the earliest nations to put a satellite into orbit from our own soil, and that was Rearsat in 1967. And by the end of 1960s, we hosted the largest number of NASA tracking stations outside of the United States. And today we continue that trend with the Canberra Deep Space Communication Complex being an integral part of NASA's Deep Space Network. They are tracking more than 40 robotic spacecraft, including Hayabusa 2, and it is one of the only locations in the world that can still communicate with Voyager 2. And as we built on that momentum, between 1968 and 1972, we played those really important roles in supporting the US in its Apollo missions and broadcasting that one giant leap to the world. And we've continued to build on it. There have been collaborations with Geoscience Australia, CSIRO, the Australian Antarctic Division, our researchers and our businesses, and of course, the Australian Space Agency. Next slide. And with that strong history in space activities in Australia, and now turning to some of that excitement we're seeing, whether it's the commercial applications where businesses are using space technologies to transform other areas of the economy. We're using technologies that are smaller, it's cheaper to get to space, but importantly, space is transforming and impacting and improving all of our lives, and it's creating jobs here in Australia. It is a driver of high-tech jobs. It's using advanced manufacturing. And in light of that, the Australian Space Agency was established a little over 2 years ago with a very, very clear purpose to grow and transform a globally respected space industry. And as part of that, not only are we inspiring the nation, not are we improving the economy and social economic standards, what we're looking to do is to triple the size of Australia's space sector from around 4 billion to 12 billion and create another 20,000 jobs. And we can do that for this massive transformation that is underway, but importantly, through international partnerships that we have, for example, with Japan, where we're able to bring our technology and our know-how and share and contribute to significant missions in the future. Next slide. And as we think through what Australia can do, very early on, as was announced by Nicola, we put out a civil space strategy which set a 10-year path for what Australia could do. And we wanted to do that so we could not only let the world know where Australia could play its role, but so we could let Australia know where it could play its role, and it's working. We said in the strategy that we wanted to support $1 billion of pipeline of inward capital coming into Australia. Currently, we're seeing around $2 billion of pipeline of capital projects coming in, of which over $700 million or so is coming from industry. That's an extremely strong base. That is pre-COVID context, but what we have seen in following the COVID pandemic is space is one of those sectors that is exhibiting resilience and a very strong basis for us to support the future growth of Australia's economy going forward. And that growth is both on some of the things Nicola spoke about. It's the collaboration, it's the technology, it's the know-how, and it's the international partnerships that allow us to achieve that. And providing that basis is that the Australian government is investing around $700 million in the civil space sector. There's around $200 million or more in the Australian Space Agency. We've heard about SmartSat and its investments. Geoscience Australia is working on positioning technology, and CSIRO, our National Science Institute, is investing in space to make sure that we have the best technologies available to transform our nation. And most excitingly, and recently in the federal budget, is the Australian government announced its modern manufacturing strategy. And as part of that, which is really focused on lifting the manufacturing capability here in Australia, providing resilience, increasing supply chains, and supporting collaboration, it identified 6 priority areas, and one of those is space. And I think if we have a look at where we've started 2 years ago as an Australian Space Agency, there's an extremely strong base to go forward, and being one of those 6 priorities in the modern manufacturing strategy is a very strong signal how space will continue to play an important part of Australia's economic recovery post-COVID-19. Next slide. And as I reflect on the various forums I've presented on over the number of years, firstly, I remember presenting at the forum saying, we're the agency, we have a strategy. I've been to the forum, and the second time around I said, we're here, we've got our strategy, and this is what we're seeing around the nation. And now what we're thinking about are the programs and activities that we can advise government that they may wish to choose to deliver so we can grow and transform the global space sector. And today, it is really pleasing to talk about in a national context the programs we've now got up and running, and we're delivering, and we're investing in businesses and showing what Australia can do with its technology. The first one is our 150 million Moon to Mars initiative. This is our signature program, and it's really focused on getting Australian technology and capabilities integrated into international supply chains to support NASA's ambitions to go forward to the moon and onto Mars. And what's really exciting about the Moon to Mars initiative is not only are we partnering with NASA, we're also partnering with others such as JAXA and other countries who are supporting the Artemis program. And this program is now up and running. It comprises 3 components. We have our supply chain program, which is about ensuring there's capability in our sector and the businesses are able to meet the requirements of supply chains. Or importantly, there are businesses out there that have not thought about space and might be able to contribute technologies into the space sector. We've recently opened up feasibility grants for our demonstrator program. And this program is about thinking through what are some of the pilot projects that we can show that can support Moon to Mars activities. And I know the team is busily thinking about our Trailblazer program. And this is the $50 million component. And as you can see on the slide, this is our inspirational piece. This is the bit where we say Australia is going to put and support NASA something on the moon. And we want Australians to look up and say, up on the moon, this is what Australia can do. And there are a range of technologies that we can contribute, which I'll touch on later. They can involve robotics, remote asset management, digital mapping, satellite-based IoT. What we know is when we talk internationally, we know our partners are very keen to engage and they know we can contribute some very strong technologies. Next slide, please. And as part of that, as we look at our Moon to Mars program, we also know what's been really, really important is to invest in the building blocks so our businesses have the capability so they can support space missions going forward. And we've made a range of investments over the last year to ensure those capabilities exist. Starting in South Australia, we've invested in a mission control facility, which is being delivered through Sabre Astronautics. This will be a unique facility to allow businesses to control their satellites from Australia, but also consider things such as observing and what's happening in orbit. We're investing in tracking facilities in Tasmania. We've also invested in a robotics automation AI command and control facility in Western Australia. And that leverages the extensive capabilities that we have in our mining sector, the range of automation, the ability to remotely control many assets from afar and show that we can apply that in space. And we've also recently announced a space payload qualification facility grant. And what we're looking to do here is to ensure the infrastructure exists so businesses can test their infrastructure and space hardware here in Australia before it goes to space. Next slide, please. And we're also investing in businesses. As part of that, we're doing that through the International Space Investment Initiative. And I would love to give you an example and talk through the $11 million in 10 projects we've invested in very, very recently. But to give some highlights about how this is opening doors, which comes back to one of the clear missions and purposes of the agency. These projects are involving collaborations with NASA, with the United Kingdom, with Europe, with France, the UAE, Japan, Canada, and Italy. We are truly opening doors and we're getting our businesses to support a range of activities around the world. And whether it be through the use of AI to support long duration human spaceflight, the creation of a large collaboration to build a CubeSat with sensors from overseas, tracking activities in orbit. Australia can do this, and it is just always rewarding to turn up to work and see the technologies that Australia is developing, and what the agency is doing is really opening those doors. Next slide, please. And I've covered much of this, but it's always good as I just close out the national component and the national perspective. Where do people, when we go around the world, what are they looking to Australia for us to support their activities? And this gives you a bit of a feeling for what we've been asked to deliver. It can be in the area of space medicine and life sciences. This draws on long experience, for example, with the Australian Antarctic Division, or drawing on the great capabilities in our Royal Flying Doctors Service. Space situational awareness. We have great capabilities that are able to support missions around the world. Advanced communication. How are we going to use optical communication, the use of quantum technologies to provide faster communication to the moon, to Mars and beyond? And how do we create new digital mapping capabilities, drawing on our expertise through, for example, Geoscience Australia and CSIRO, and turning those capabilities to the lunar surface, to the the Mars surface, and of course, wherever it needs to be throughout our space missions. And a very big one is our remote operations. When people from around the world come and have a look at what we achieve in our mining sector and they turn their view to the moon and onto Mars, these are capabilities that can fit into some very signature space missions going forward. Next slide, please. So I'm going to switch into the international part. And as I think through our civil space strategy, our civil space strategy says we have to do 4 things for us to be successful. The first one is opening doors, and this is what our international component will talk about today. But of course, the other 3 areas include building that national capability, and that's what I wanted to touch on as I went through the national perspective. Of course, we have a regulatory component, which is our 3rd part, and the 4th, which I'll finish on today, will be our Inspire, and that is one that I am absolutely passionate about, and we'll spend a little bit of time later. Next slide. But the first thing I want to talk about, and even as we think through the challenges that we're facing with COVID-19, and I do want to pause and reflect that many both in South Australia, in Australia and around the world are grappling with some very significant issues. One thing we've been very clear on in the agency is how can we continue to support the community and the economy post-COVID-19 and ensure that momentum is there at the right time. And the way we have done that, and just to showcase some of the strong engagement we've had with Japan over the last year, is that while we were in lockdown and while we were doing many Zoom meetings and no longer able to travel, that didn't stop us from opening those doors internationally. And it was really pleasing to see Dr. Megan Clark and Dr. Yamakawa to sign a memorandum of cooperation in July 2020, which sets the scene for really strong space collaborations going forward, but it builds on a strong base of 40 years of treaty-level science cooperation between our countries. And every time we catch up with JAXA, there are a range of areas where we know we can explore. One of the ones is the Seeds in Space, which was only very recently, where we're sending wattle seeds to the International Space Station thanks to JAXA, and we are really thankful for that because it really allows our students to be able to touch and feel space going forward. And of course, one of the really exciting missions that we've got, and if we turn to the next slide, is Hayabusa 2. And some of you may not have seen this fancy patch, which I have to put my hats off to our communications team and others that have been involved. But this is a signature mission that I really know that JAXA and Dr. Yamakawa will talk about very soon. But as we think through our memorandum of cooperation and we think through the opportunities that space provide, but importantly, both of our prime ministers have come together twice this year and the topic of space has come up. And one of the centerpieces of those conversations is the Hayabusa 2 mission, which is just an amazing science and technological feat and what it has been able to achieve and bringing back the first subsurface sample from an asteroid. And it's been very rewarding to work with JAXA on this. But I do want to highlight that the mission did start in 2014 and no one could have predicted the pandemic that we are now facing. Now, the planning that was probably arranged in 2014, the way that it will unfold in the coming weeks probably looks different. We are complying with what we need to do with our pandemic requirements, but we're forging strong collaborations, not only with JAXA to make sure this mission is successful, but working across government to make sure that the support is there for this mission to be success. And what I really do hope is it gives hope to the world in what has been a very trying year. The fact that JAXA will achieve something so significant and Australia can play its role in both facilitating the connection, but importantly, we have a regulatory component to ensure the activities are safe as reasonably practicable. It really shows how two nations can work together on such a significant project. Next slide, please. But we've worked very closely with JAXA in Japan this year, but that has not been the only activity that we've done. We've continued to open those doors, and a big hats off to Carl and Order in my team, who continually work long hours to really open up those doors. It's why we haven't travelled internationally. Zoom, Skype, Microsoft Teams, they've been our forums to engage and open those doors so our Australian businesses have opportunities to explore new international collaborations. We've got a range of memorandum of understandings, letters of intent, and we're working closely with industry, and that's only going to continue. Next slide, please. The one I do want to touch on, which was a significant undertaking for Australia, and I know Japan was involved with this as well, is one of the big pieces we're now involved is what we call the Artemis Accords. And this is a document that established principles to guide space activities going forward. It's grounded in the Outer Space Treaties, and we joined 8 other nations in forging the Accords so that we can work together as we look forward to the moon and onto Mars. Next slide, please. And finally, as I touched through the civil space strategy, I spoke about the 4 areas that we focus on. The 4th area, which is the inspirational piece. And as we think through what has been a really challenging and trying year, in Australia, we faced bushfires, there have been storms, and then we faced the COVID pandemic. And our hearts do go out to the world that are now in the Northern Hemisphere who are going into winter and many countries going into lockdown. It has been a very, very hard year for many, many people. But the one thing space can do is it can inspire. And one thing the agency is doing at the right time is to engage with the community and show how space can be an important part of everyone's future. And this is the inspire piece. I always talk about how do we inspire kids. We inspire kids through space and dinosaurs. I look after space, and that's what we want to do, whether it's the Hayabusa 2 mission, whether it's Moon to Mars, and our Trailblazer program, and making Australia proud that Australia is involved in some significant activity going forward. And we're going to bring that together here in Adelaide with the establishment of the Australian Space Discovery Centre so that the world and can come to Adelaide and touch and feel what Australia can do in space. And there are a range of other activities that we will do. We're working with SmartSat CRC to understand the future workforce. What are the ways and what are the skills that are needed to go forward? How do we work with businesses that haven't thought about space going forward? Space is just another area to operate, just like land, sea, and air. And with the ability for space to inspire, this is what the agency is driven by. This is why it delivers its programs. This is why we turn up and do our job every day, because in 10 years' time, there will be 20,000 new jobs. We'll have triple the size of the economy. We'll be forging new relationships and building on strong relationships such as with Japan. But importantly, there will be Australian technology in space, and we'll be inspiring the parents and the kids to be involved. And what we also are very, very mindful of is as we make these investments, we'll ensure those investments improve other areas of the economy. Space can improve agriculture. Space will help us manage drought. Space will help us support and monitor disasters. And that is why I come to work every day. This is why space is inspiring. And I just thank you for your time today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Anthony. That's really brilliant to see the dedication of the space sector in Australia. And as you were saying, though, it's a collaborative effort. So I know that a lot of you watching from home or wherever you are going to have a lot of questions. So I just want to make sure if you are submitting questions, make sure you're in the space trends session so that we can kind of appropriate the right questions to the next Q&A, where Anthony will be coming back to join us as well. But now, what I would like to do is actually introduce our next speaker, who is joining us from Japan. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Hiroshi Yamakawa, the president of the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Hiroshi Yamakawa, president of JAXA, and thank you very much for giving me this wonderful opportunity to talk about JAXA's activities, including our cooperative relationship with Australia. Could you go to the first page of my presentation? Well, thank you. I would like to begin my talk with by briefly introducing Japan's space policy. Next page, please. Well, the most fundamental plan for Japan's space development and utilization is the Basic Plan on Space Policy, which is developed by the Strategic Headquarters for Space Policy, headed by the Prime Minister. The Basic Plan on Space Policy is implemented by relevant governmental ministries and agencies, as shown in this figure, and JAXA is positioned as the core implementing organization that supports the government's overall space activities with technology development. Next page, please. And the new basic plan, which was revised this June, sets forth the following 5 pillars, as shown here: ensuring space security, contribution to disaster management, national resilience, and resolving global issues. Number 3, creating knowledge through space science and exploration. And number 4, economic growth and innovation. And finally, strengthening the industrial, scientific, and technological basis. And the next page, please. And in accordance with this basic plan on space policy of the government, JAXA formulates the JAXA mid to long-term plan and engages in activities to achieve these national policy goals. So now I would like to introduce some of JAXA's recent highlights. Next page, please. Well, this is about a rocket, and we are currently developing Japan's new flagship launch vehicle. We call it H3 rocket. And the first launch is scheduled next fiscal year, 2021. Next, please. Well, for Earth observation, the Advanced Land Observing Satellite, ALS series, is used for a wide range of purposes, including cartography, regional observation, disaster monitoring, and also resource surveying. And for example, ALS-3 is also scheduled to be launched in fiscal year 2021 using the next generation launch vehicle H3. Next page, please. Well, talking about our human space activity, last week, as already explained, last week on November the 16th, astronaut Noguchi traveled to the International Space Station ISS as the first Japanese astronaut to fly on a US commercial spacecraft, the Crew Dragon. And following astronaut Noguchi, astronaut Hoshide on the right is scheduled to fly to the ISS following astronaut Noguchi and serve as the ISS commander. Next, please. Well, as for the lunar surface exploration, JAXA is planning to launch the SLIM spacecraft, which means the smart lander for investigating the moon, in 2022 fiscal year, which is designed to demonstrate precision landing capability on the lunar surface. And in addition, JAXA will continue its investigation into a lunar polar exploration mission, collaboration with ISRO, which of Indian Space Research Organization. Next, please. Well, talking about space debris or the sustainable use of outer space, JAXA has a comprehensive approach to reduce the amount of new space debris and to maintain the stable use of outer space. For example, operation of SSA, space situation awareness, using our ground facilities to avoid collisions between JAXA satellites and space debris, and contribution to international standardization activities for the stable use of outer space. I'm talking about the rules and the laws, and also research and development to reduce the threat and risk of space debris. And for example, you can see on the right of my slide, JAXA is currently planning to conduct active debris removal demonstration missions in partnership with the private sector. especially startup companies. Next page, please. Now I will talk a little bit about our space, economy strategy. Here we have 3 initiatives that we are trying to implement. And the first one is to promote the growth of space industry, which we call JSPARC. Well, in recent years, Japan has seen a lot of activities in space, startups, and new entrants in the space industry. And JAXA has launched a new research and development program called JSPARC, which aims to create new space-related businesses in partnership with companies that want to enter into space business. And JAXA supports the private sector through feasibility studies and research and development, which utilizes JAXA's space development technologies and know-how. So far, more than 30 companies have already participated in this JSPARC program and are gradually developing their businesses. Next page, please. For example, there is a space travel business launched by a venture company, PD Aerospace Limited, on the left. And at the center, you can see Space Avatar, which is a project led by a Japanese airline company, ANA. And on the right, you can see a consortium called Space Food Sphere, which aims to solve challenges concerning food security, both on Earth and in space. Regarding the ANA Avatar, for the first time in the world, an event was held this past weekend where the general public was able to remotely operate from the streets in Tokyo a robotic space avatar system that is set up on board the ISS. So people in Tokyo on the streets could control the robot avatar system on board the ISS. Next page, please. And the second initiative of JAXA for space industry is Space Exploration Innovation Hub Center. I'm sorry about the long name, but the activities on gravitational celestial bodies, including the moon, are more likely to utilize not only space technology, but also ground-based technologies. So JAXA's Exploration Hub Center has introduced a new concept called dual utilization to develop technologies that are not only used for space exploration, but also commercialized on Earth. And currently, more than 50 private companies are engaging in joint research with JAXA. And 90% of these companies are from non-space industries. This is the important point, such as construction, housing, toys, agriculture, and cosmetics sectors. Next page, please. And the third initiative is JAXA's collaboration with industry in lunar exploration program. And this slide shows a human pressurized lunar rover, and this is to prepare for full-scale lunar exploration activities further into the future. And currently, JAXA is conducting a joint research with a private company, concretely speaking, Toyota Motors, to develop this human pressurized lunar rover for a sustainable exploration on the lunar surface. Next page, please. Now, I would like to introduce some of the highlights of the Japan-Australia cooperation in the space sector to date. Well, since 1978, the Australian Bureau of Meteorology has been receiving data from Japan's geostationary meteorological satellite Himawari, and also near real-time data from JAXA's Global Change Observation Mission. We call it GCOMW, since 2012. Next page, please. Excuse me, could you go back one page? So, thank you very much. And in 1987, the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization, CSIRO, started to receive data directly from JAXA's oceanographic, satellite, MOS-1, and conducted research using the data. Next page, please. And in addition, Australia and Japan have a history of cooperation on VLBI observations. By the way, VLBI means the Very Long Baseline Interferometry observations for science. And for example, and also in 2001, Australia's first domestically developed satellite, FedSat, was launched on board Japan's H2A No. 4 rocket as part of a commemorative project to celebrate the centenary of Australian Commonwealth. In 2017, we installed JAXA's telescopes at the Australian National University's Siding Spring Observatory to conduct space debris observations. And this made it possible for us to observe the skies of the southern hemisphere, which obviously cannot be done in Japan. Next page, please. And since 2015, JAXA has been conducting scientific balloon experiments at the Alice Springs Balloon Launching Station in Australia's Northern Territory in accordance with an agreement between JAXA and CSIRO. And in addition, using signals from Japan's Michibiki Positioning Satellite for PNT, demonstration tests of agricultural work performed by automatically controlled tractor, as well as driving demonstration of self-driving cars were conducted in Australia with the cooperation of Japanese and Australian industries. Next page, please. And we've seen, well, Anthony kindly showed this slide beforehand, but I also would like to talk about this. And in July this year, JAXA and the Australian Space Agency signed a Memorandum of Cooperation, MOC, on space utilization. And the signing ceremony was attended by the former Australian ambassador to Japan and the Japanese ambassador to Australia. And of course, Dr. Megan Clark. And this signing of this MOC became a topic of conversation during the Japan-Australia Summit meeting held 2 days later. And the two leaders welcomed the promotion of cooperation between the two space agencies. With this MOC signed and with the kind assistance offered by the Australian Space Agency to act as a bridge to identify opportunities for collaboration, we are hopeful that we can launch concrete cooperative activities between JAXA and various Australian institutions in the near future. Well, as Australia and Japan continue to expand and deepen our space cooperation, thanks to the establishment of cooperative relationship between the two space agencies, JAXA looks forward to working with Australian Space Agency colleagues as major partners in the Asia-Pacific regions to jointly enhance space activities in the region. I believe this promotion of cooperative relationship between our space agencies will contribute to the enhancement of special strategic partnership between the two countries. Next page, please. And as I already introduced, on December 6th, only 10 days from now, the Hayabusa 2 capsule will return to Woomera, South Australia. And the capsule contains a sample of the asteroid Ryugu. Next page, please. And the Hayabusa 2 was launched from the Tanegashima Space Center in December 2014, and it arrived at the asteroid Ryugu after traveling for about 3.5 years. Then Hayabusa 2 made 2 touchdowns, twice on Ryugu, and collected samples. And after 6 years and 5.2 billion kilometers of voyage, samples of the asteroid will soon be delivered to the Earth. And next page, please. It will show a video. And this video shows, I hope it will be shown, Hayabusa 2 touching down in an artificial crater created using an impact device and collecting samples from the asteroid's interior. And it is thought that the asteroid Ryugu will still contains water and organic matters from the time when the solar system was born. And by analyzing these samples, we hope to answer questions such as where did the water on Earth come from, and where did the organic matter that makes up come from. Thank you. And we would like to thank the Australian authorities for their generous support for the return of the Hayabusa 2 capsule to Woomera. To gain access to the Woomera prohibited area, we have received permission from the Department of Defense, and we also received permission from the Honorable Karen Andrews, the Minister of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources, to allow the capsule from space to return to Australia. Furthermore, the Australian government has given special consideration to JAXA and JAXA Japanese personnel involved in the recovery of the Hayabusa 2 capsule, and has allowed us to enter Australia despite the existing travel restrictions between the two countries due to the pandemic. And our capsule recovery team have arrived in Adelaide since early November. And after 14 days of voluntary quarantine, isolation, work is currently underway at Woomera to prepare for the recovery mission. I would like to say, without your support and cooperation, the recovery of the Hayabusa 2 capsule would not be possible. Once again, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to our friends in Australia for your tremendous support given to us. And I look forward to continuing to work closely with you to complete our mission successfully. Next page, please. And next page, please. Thank you very much. And finally, I would like to talk about Artemis. And in October 2019, the Japanese government decided to participate in the US proposed International Space Exploration Program, Artemis program. And it may still be fresh in your memory that the guiding principle for space exploration cooperation, called the Artemis Accords, was signed last month by the United States, Australia, Canada, UK, Italy, Luxembourg, the UAE, and Japan. And JAXA would like to contribute to the Artemis program by providing the gateway with the habitation functions, engaging in resupply missions, as well as cooperation on the lunar surface for future sustainable activities. Utilize JAXA's expertise in manned and unmanned space technologies. And Australia, like Japan, as already shown, has signed the Artemis Accords. And I'm aware that the Australian Space Agency has already secured some amount of budget and plans to offer products and services that utilizes the capabilities of Australian space industry. And as members of the first 8 nations to sign the Artemis Accords, I'm encouraged that we will be leading the future of international space exploration together. Thank you very much. This concludes my presentation.
Dr. Yamakawa, it's absolutely brilliant to be able to hear the level of collaboration that's happening between Japan and Australia, and not just from the history that's gone past, but I think that seeing that same photo of the signing of the Memorandum of Cooperation just goes to show how proud both of our nations are of our ability to work together and innovate together. So whilst we still have our speakers online, I'm very excited now to actually have the opportunity to facilitate some bilateral discussion with our space leaders. So the first questions I'm going to ask will be directed towards Anthony. Anthony, what will be the biggest driver of industry growth at a national level in the next year?
Thank you for that question. So we think about this quite a lot. And setting the scene a little bit is that we're at this really exciting time for the space sector. We've got space technologies improving other areas of the economy. For Australia, we're now at a point where we're showing there are other areas of the economy that can contribute to space, like our mining area. And there is the development of high-tech skills in advanced manufacturing. So if I look at that context, and particularly with the sector around the world still forecast to be around 1 trillion by 2040. The fact that we can draw on automation, new materials, AI, and we've only touched the surface. The next year, where do I think our focus will be in the growth? The first part will be as the government rolls out its modern manufacturing strategy, and that's 1.5 billion, where space is a priority area. That will be one of the early opportunities for those looking to manufacture in space to get some growth. We're running a range of our programs. The Moon to Mars initiative, we're focusing on the supply chains, and this is very much around providing the support for businesses so their capabilities to contribute to Moon to Mars activities. But the other area where I see some great opportunities is that if I reflect on things like the Gravity Challenge, which has just been run, there are a whole range of companies, both here in Australia and around the world, that are using technologies to help agriculture, to help with new forms of transportation, to look at how we're managing water. And I think that growth is going to be a real signal and a real opportunity for many businesses, and then through the application of space data to continue to grow. So I think, in summary, the two big areas are where we're investing in, for example, our Moon to Mars activities, our investments in our international space investment initiatives. But companies are now applying these space technologies in a range of sectors, and that's just going to provide a really strong base. And I should pause and also say that it's worth reflecting that Defence is about to spend at least $7 billion in satellite communications in Australia over the coming years. So I think the other part will be investing in the capabilities now so we have the workforce to meet that need. And while that's a defence activity, civil space will be able to transfer its capabilities into that area.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely fascinating. So it's great to hear that sort of answer and just see how many different areas are actually going to be having growth. It's fantastic. So what space capabilities do you think Australia will be set apart in for the future, and will that be leveraged internationally? Like, what makes us different? Where are we going?
I think Australia is lucky for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we have a unique geography in the southern hemisphere, which means we're always going to have a significant role in areas such as communications. And I gave that story of the Deep Space Network where we're involved with Tidbinbilla. We're the only tracking station in the world that can still speak to Voyager 2. Once it gets its upgrade, it's getting upgraded at the moment. However, as we look forward to the moon and onto Mars, Australia is going to always play a role in the communication piece. But as we go around and we talk to Jim Bridenstine from NASA, we're talking to JAXA and Professor Yamakawa, the areas we're seeing where we can play a role, remote asset management. It is the leveraging of the automation capabilities we have in our mining sector. And particularly if we look at scientific exploration using in situ resource utilisation, we're world class in these particular areas. And these are the areas where countries around the world are looking to partner with Australia. And the reason I said earlier that we're lucky is that because we're looking at adjacent industries, it means many of these capabilities are already in the market and being used. So what our role to get it into space is to demonstrate the space heritage to move it over. So it means we're at a very high level of capability, and now we're focusing, for example, through the Moon to Mars program to show that they can be applied in space or through our investment through our Space Infrastructure Fund. Other areas I just want to touch on, we're in, many people in South Australia are watching, but the satellite-based IoT, we're seeing really strong growth in that area. We have two of the commercial companies in the world, Myriota and Fleet, that are really transforming how you can use space. And I think that area is only going to grow. And the last one I would touch on is Australia is world-class in how it uses data. We're looking at AI as well, but the digital mapping and how we look at the lunar surface, what do we need to do on Mars? There are all these capabilities that we can contribute. The one thing we're mindful of, we can't do everything. We're talking to our partners through our memoranda of understandings and cooperation, so we know where their gaps are, and we're very focused on making sure we bring capabilities into gaps into international markets, because that's how we're really going to grow our industry here.
Thank you, Anthony. Actually, I'm thrilled to hear that we're still in touch with Voyager 2, because my little kind of touch into space is I actually have a replica of the gold disc that's on Voyager on my wall at home. So I'm absolutely thrilled to bits that we're still in touch, even though it's in deep space. Next question again to you is, how is the Australian Space Agency ensuring that momentum on international activities and collaboration remains strong despite not being able to travel?
Thank you. And I touched a little bit on this in my presentation, but a big hats off to my team. And one thing I will pause and reflect as we've gone through and we face the challenges associated with COVID-19 and the range of video conference meetings through Zoom, Microsoft Teams, etc. You learn very quickly Australia really is on the other side of the world. And we've done many a conference or a video conference at 12 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock in the morning. So big hats off to Ord, Carl, their teams and many in the agency who've really had that commitment. Coming back to my presentation, we're committed to really growing the industry and opening those doors. So we haven't been able to travel, but gee, we've been busy on the computers and with the video. And some of the things that we've done, we have attended the virtual events, whether it is in India or in the IAC, which was held virtually, holding virtual booths. I showed the picture of where we signed virtually our memorandum of cooperation with JAXA. We're also working with Austrade and our embassy in the US, and we're supporting engagement between Australian companies and US companies about potential for engagement and integration into supply chains. Teams working with NASA on Moon to Mars, so we meet with them monthly to talk through activities. And of course, we had close engagement as we prepared the Artemis Accords. And again, as was said by President Yamakawa, very, very proud to be part of the founding 8 so we can work forward on the moon and on Mars, setting a rule of law and supporting ongoing international relationships. But as part of that, of course, the other thing we're doing is we're working on Hayabusa 2. So we're not traveling, but we are finding ways to work smarter and ensure we get that engagement, because it comes back to our purpose, grow and transform our space industry. We've got to do this through international partnerships and collaborations, and the team is committed to keep doing that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And look, I've just got one final question for you. So you did mention that dinosaurs in space is what inspires kids, but what's going to actually inspire the next generation for a workforce in the space industry?
So that's a great question. I do talk about space and dinosaurs, but I think this is why we're embracing activities such as the Moon to Mars initiative. We're putting a lot of energy into what this trailblazer activity is. What we want to do is connect not only with the kids, but with the parents to show that Australia can do this, Australia can participate in space, and it can be our kids that are in school now that are developing those technologies. It's why we're investing in the Trailblazer program, to find the part that Australia can build and participate and support the activities on Moon to Mars, so that compared to 10 years ago when it was very hard for someone thinking about space to think that they could build or participate in space here, they were traveling overseas. We're changing that tide. We're investing in companies here in Australia so that workforce does exist. And of course, one thing we're actively working on now is we're doing a range of technology roadmaps. And this has been led by our CTO in the office. We're looking at our priority areas, and we're doing a deep dive to understand where Australia can play a role in 10 years' time, so that we can be very clear to the researchers, to businesses, about where Australia can invest in capabilities and, importantly, show what type of workforce we need. And the last thing we're doing, we've got to get out there and tell our story. Yeah. We've got to get out there and say to the kids, we've got a space agency, we're here, we're partnering with NASA, we're partnering with JAXA, we're helping them with Hayabusa 2. So when that lands and when that capsule returns, the fact that we could tell a story about how Australia played a small but important role to support JAXA in these significant space missions is really a way that we want to get in the hearts and minds and at the kitchen table. So when they think about what future jobs will be, the first word I want to hear is space.
And that is absolutely fantastic. I would have loved to have known that, space was a genuine career option for me when I was growing up. But as it turns out, I ended up in advertising. So that's where the cookie crumbles. Fantastic to see that, there's a real focus on that and that careers can be developed, and it's going to be here in Australia as well. So my next questions, I'm actually going to go back to Dr. Yamakawa. And Dr. Yamakawa, what will happen to the samples and the Hayabusa 2, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, after the capsule recovery?
Well, thank you very much for the question. The recovered capsule will be transported by helicopter to the Quick Look facility in Woomera. And since the capsule may contains a small amount of gas that have oozed out of the Ryugu's asteroid samples, it will be briefly analyzed on site before becoming contaminated by the Earth's atmosphere. And then the samples will be stored in a specially sealed shipping box and flown to Japan. Then they will be transported into a clean room in the JAXA planetary material sample curation facility and in a vacuum environment. The container containing the samples will be taken out and the lid removed. And the pickup of individual samples in the curation facility is scheduled to begin next year, maybe in January. And talking about the Hayabusa spacecraft itself, because the Hayabusa spacecraft will not re-enter the Earth atmosphere, but after the return of the capsule to Earth, the spacecraft itself will go on to a new mission. Its new destination is a small asteroid called 1998 KY26. Sorry for the long name. And we aim to rendezvous with this asteroid by making a long journey exceeding over 10 years. So the next rendezvous will be in 10 years. Thank you for the question.
Wow. No, and I've got a couple more questions for you as well, but that's absolutely amazing that you can tee that up for 10 years on an asteroid. That's fantastic. So Japan does lead the world in sample recovery technology, as you've just talked about. So what are the future exploration plans?
Well, thank you again for the question. And by taking advantage of Japan's small celestial bodies exploration and sample return technologies, as accumulated through Hayabusa 1 and Hayabusa 2 missions, we are trying to promote the next mission called MMX. And in this case, MMX stands for Martian Moons Exploration. And it is to bring back the first samples from the Martian moons, which is one of the most important unexplored targets in the solar system. And a space probe is scheduled to be launched in fiscal year 2024. That means 4 years from now. And in addition to its various scientific objectives, MMX, this spacecraft will be the world's first Mars return missions. So we believe that it will be a significant milestone for future manned exploration conducted through international cooperation. I like to say that MMX itself is unmanned, but may contribute to the future manned mission.
Yeah, so it's unexplored territory. I mean, it's definitely going into new spaces. And my final question for you is purely about JAXA's efforts to realise your debris recovery. You did touch on this in your presentation as well, and also talking about your collaboration with private enterprise. Are you able to expand on that a little bit more?
Oh, thank you again for your question. Well, as you mentioned, JAXA is investigating an active debris removal system for removing large debris objects, such as rocket upper stage. And we need at least 3 technologies for active space debris removal. And the first one is the rendezvous technology to non-cooperative space debris, because the space debris is malfunctioning, so it doesn't have any control. And the second key technology is capture technology for non-cooperative large intact space debris. And I think the mechanism to capture slowly rotating rocket upper stage is necessary. And the third key technology is efficient propulsion system to remove large space debris effectively. And as I already explained, JAXA plans to demonstrate this kind of removal of a large-sized debris in 2 phases in partnership with private enterprises. And in this partnership, JAXA provides technical support with our R&D assets, and commercial partners lead the system design based on their business strategies while fulfilling JAXA's technical requirements. So this new partnership will give industry partners opportunities to advance their businesses. And for this project, we have selected for the phase one a company called Astroscale Japan Inc. for this mission. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Yamakawa. It's been wonderful to actually watch the relationship blossoming between Australia and Japan for space exploration and for all of these other interests that we're looking into. So I do want to thank both you and Anthony for joining us this morning and for participating in this Q&A. Now, just before we break, we do have some special remarks from our platinum sponsor. So the AMDA Foundation, who themselves know all too well the complexity in organising events through a pandemic. Please welcome, via video of course, Mr. Ian Honoré, the Chief Executive of the AMDA Foundation.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and thank you to the South Australian Space Industry Centre for the opportunity to speak with you all today as part of the 10th Australian Space Forum. My name is Ian Honoré, and I'm the Chief Executive of AMDA Foundation Limited, which is a not-for-profit organisation established to promote the development of Australian industry, manufacturing and technological capability in the fields of aerospace, aviation, maritime, defence and security. We're best known, I guess, for our role as the organisers of the Australian International Airshow and Aerospace and Defence Exposition held biennially at Avalon, the Land Forces Land Defence Exposition held in Brisbane, and the Indo-Pacific Maritime Exposition held in Sydney. Space is an extremely important part of the future of Australia, and I want to particularly congratulate the South Australian Government for its leadership and its initiative in this extremely important field for Australia. I also want to congratulate the government in its support for this forum, which has become a leading event as part of the process of promoting Australia's space capabilities. In addition, I especially want to pay tribute to the hard work and to the flexibility and adaptability of the organisers of the Space Forum in being able to put on this event virtually at the last moment as a result of the recent COVID challenges here in South Australia. As an event organiser, we understand exactly what you've gone through and how well you've done it. Congratulations. We'll be here again on the 31st of March to support you and to be, hopefully, a platinum sponsor again if you invite us to do that. Because we believe that what you're doing here with the Space Forum is extremely important for the future of this nation.
So much, Ian. We're now going to take a short break, and because we're all dialing in from different time zones, we're going to take about 15 minutes, so synchronise your watches and we'll see you back soon.